They said, when a man loses everything, he becomes nothing. But what if losing everything is exactly how something ancient finds you? Frank had it all: wealth, respect, a beautiful family. Until one deal, 1 minute, destroyed his entire life overnight. His house was taken. His children starved. His wife abandoned him. But that was not the worst part. Because on the night he lost everything, something started watching him. And what it wanted was not his money. It wanted him. The elders in the village would later say, when a man falls and does not shatter, the earth itself begins to watch him. But on the night Frank lost everything, no one was watching. Frank had once been a man whose name opened doors. At 40, he stood tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned like polished ebony, with a clean, low-cut and beautifully groomed side beards that gave him a distinguished presence. His clothes were always crisp, tailored senator outfits, polished shoes, a gold wristwatch that caught the sun like fire. He was not just rich. He was respected. In Lagos, his business moved goods across states. Traders greeted him with smiles. Bankers shook his hand twice. Even the stubborn market women called him Na Ani, our own. At home, his wife Amara lived like a queen. She adorned herself with coral beads, silk wrappers, and gold earrings that jingled softly when she walked. Their 3 children, Chinedu, 9, Obinna, 7, and little Adiz, 6, ran through a house filled with laughter, marble floors, and the scent of expensive perfume. Frank believed in 2 things: hard work and God. He never imagined both would be tested at the same time. The deal that smelled like gold. It came quietly. A man named Chief Bako. No one could say exactly where he came from. Some said Ghana. Others whispered Cameroon. But he spoke with authority, dressed in a flowing agbada stitched with gold thread, and carried himself like a man who knew secrets others did not. He approached Frank with an offer. Bulk electronics, Bako said smoothly, his voice like oil on water. Imported. Genuine. At half the price. Frank hesitated. Why so cheap? Bako smiled. Because I do not sell to everyone. Something about him felt strange. His eyes lingered too long. His shadow under the afternoon sun seemed to stretch just a little further than it should. But greed does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Frank signed the deal. The night everything died. The goods arrived at night. Large containers. So heavy. Frank supervised personally, excitement building in his chest. This is it, he told Amara that evening. This will change everything. But by morning, everything had already changed. The goods were fake. Not defective. Not damaged. Empty casings. Dead circuits. Worthless metal. Frank's heart pounded as he called Bako's number. Switched off. He rushed to the address Bako had given. Nothing. The building stood abandoned, covered in dust like it had not seen life in years. And then, the calls began. The taking. The bank did not shout. It did not threaten. It simply acted. Letters came first. Then the officials. Then silence, followed by force. Frank stood outside his own house as strangers walked through it, tagging furniture, documenting assets. Sir, please cooperate, one officer said coldly. This property has been repossessed. Amara cried. The children clung to her wrapper. Frank said nothing. Days later they moved. The fall into dust. Their new home was a single-room structure in a crowded, noisy neighborhood where gutters overflowed and generators hummed like angry spirits. The walls were cracked. The air was heavy. At night, mosquitoes sang like curses. Frank traded suits for worn-out shirts. His polished shoes became rubber slippers. His hands, once soft, hardened with labor. He carried cement. He washed cars. He loaded trucks under the burning sun. And still, it was not enough. The children stopped going to school. Daddy, little Adiz asked one evening, her voice small, when are we going back to our big house? Frank forced a smile. Soon, he said. But even he did not know if it was true. The mockery. Respect disappeared faster than wealth. Old friends crossed the street to avoid him. Neighbors whispered. See him, that big man. Everything gone. Even Amara changed. Her laughter vanished. Her eyes hardened. You trusted the wrong people, she snapped one night. Now look at us. Frank remained silent, but her words dug deep. Some nights, he would sit outside under the dim glow of a flickering bulb, staring into the darkness. And yet, every morning before stepping out, he knelt. I don't understand, but I trust you. The night of abandonment. It happened without warning. Frank returned late, his body aching from work. The room was quiet. Too quiet. He looked around. Amara's clothes were gone. Her jewelry box is empty. His heart dropped. Amara? No answer. Then he saw them. 3 children. Huddled together. Afraid. Daddy, Chinedu whispered. Mommy said she's going to find a better life. Frank froze. Something inside him cracked. But he did not fall. He pulled them close, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. I'm here. That night, after they slept, Frank stepped outside. The sky was unusually dark. No stars. No moon. Just thick, endless black. And then, a voice. Frank. He turned sharply. No one. Frank. This time closer. The air grew cold. The ground beneath his feet felt alive. And from the shadow of a nearby tree, he saw it. An old woman, wrapped in tattered cloth. Her eyes glowed faintly like embers. You have lost everything, she said. Frank's chest tightened. Who are you? She smiled. A smile that felt older than time. I watch when men are broken and when they refuse to break. Frank stepped back. I don't understand. The woman leaned closer. Your loss was not ordinary. Silence. Then she whispered. The man who deceived you is not a man. Frank's breath caught. What do you mean? Her eyes burned brighter. He has walked this land for generations, feeding on the downfall of men who rise too fast. Frank's heart pounded. Bako? The old woman nodded slowly. Yes. A sudden wind swept through the street. The shadows around them twisted unnaturally. And now, she said, her voice dropping into something deeper, darker. He has marked you. Frank's body went cold. Marked me, for what? The woman straightened. For a brief moment, her frail body seemed to stretch, taller, stronger, something not entirely human. For return. A loud crash echoed behind Frank. He spun around. The door to his house burst open. His children screamed. Daddy! Frank rushed forward. But the moment he stepped inside, everything went silent. The room was empty. No children. No sound. Just darkness. And on the wall, drawn in something thick and red, a symbol. Pulsing. Alive. Behind him, the old woman's voice echoed like a whisper carried by spirits. You have been chosen. The night did not end when the symbol appeared. It deepened. Inside the small room, the air felt heavier, as though something unseen had settled among them. The glowing red symbol on the cracked wall pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat alive, watching. Frank stood frozen, his broad shoulders tense, his eyes locked on the mark. The faint red glow reflected in his pupils, making his usually calm gaze look distant, almost altered. Behind him, the children huddled together. Daddy! Adi's small voice trembled, her fingers tightening around Chinedu's arm. Frank did not respond immediately. His mind was racing. This was no ordinary occurrence. Nothing in his years of struggle, loss, and survival had prepared him for this. Not the betrayal in business. Not the humiliation. Not even the loneliness that came after his wife left. This was different. Slowly, he stepped closer to the wall. Don't touch it. Chinedu blurted out suddenly, his voice sharper than expected. Frank paused. For a brief moment, silence swallowed the room again. The symbol pulsed brighter. A low, almost inaudible hum filled the air. And just like that, the lantern light flickered. Twice. Then steadied. Frank exhaled slowly, lowering his hand. We will be fine, he said quietly, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. All of us. But even as he spoke, something in his chest tightened. because deep down he wasn't sure. Waxing crescent moon, the return of the stranger. The next morning came too quickly. Sunlight crept into the room, soft and golden, but it did nothing to warm the unease that lingered. The symbol was gone. Completely gone. Only the cracked wall remained, as if nothing had ever happened. Obina blinked at it in confusion. "Daddy, it was here." "I know," Frank replied, his voice low. But his eyes said something else. He remembered it clearly. Too clearly. That same morning, Frank left for work, though his mind was far from the crates he carried and the labor he forced his body through. Every sound felt sharper. Every shadow felt longer. And then, "She has marked you." Frank froze. The voice came from behind him. Slow. Familiar. Turned. The old woman stood there. But this time she was not hidden in shadows. She stood in full daylight. And yet something about her still did not belong. People passed by her without reaction, as if they could not see her. Frank's heartbeat quickened. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice firm but cautious. The old woman stepped closer, her thin frame moving with unsettling ease. "That mark," she said, her glowing eyes fixed on him, "is not a curse." Frank frowned. "Then what is it?" She tilted her head slightly. "A call. Fire. The truth begins to unfold." That evening, Frank returned home earlier than usual. The children rushed to greet him, their faces lighting up, but he could see it. They were still afraid. And he couldn't blame them. "Stay close to me tonight," he told them gently. They nodded. As darkness fell, the air shifted again. The same heaviness. The same silence. Then it happened. The symbol returned. But this time, it appeared faster, brighter, stronger. The red glow spread across the wall, forming the same circular pattern, but now, it pulsed more intensely, casting sharp shadows across the room. Adiz buried her face in Frank's side. Obina stepped back. Chinedu stood still, watching closely. "Daddy." Frank didn't answer, because something else was happening. The symbol was changing. Lines within it began to move, shifting, rearranging, forming something new. And then, a voice. Not from outside. Not from the room. But from within. "Bearer." Frank staggered slightly. His head snapped up. The children looked at him in fear. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. They shook their heads. The voice came again. Stronger. "Bearer of the mark, your time has come." Frank's breathing grew heavier. "What do you want from me?" he said under his breath. The symbol flared. And suddenly, the room went dark. New moon the other side. Frank opened his eyes. But he was no longer in the room. He stood in a vast space. Endless. Silent. The ground beneath him was smooth like stone, yet it reflected faint light. A figure appeared. Familiar. The same presence from the night before. But now clear. More defined. "You have suffered," the figure said, its voice echoing unnaturally. Frank stood his ground, though his heart pounded. "Yes. You were betrayed. Yes. You lost everything." Frank clenched his fists. "Yes." The figure stepped closer. "And yet you did not break." Silence. "You were chosen because of that." Frank's brows furrowed. "Chosen for what?" The figure raised a hand. And suddenly visions flashed around them. Frank saw his past. His success. His downfall. His wife is leaving. His children are crying. Every moment. Every pain. Every decision. Then the visions changed. He saw wealth again. Power. Influence. His children are in good schools. A better life. A restored future. His breath caught. "What is this?" The figure's voice lowered. "A path. Balance scale the offer. You can have it all back," the figure continued. Frank's eyes narrowed. "There's always a cost." The figure paused. A slow, almost amused tone. "Of course." The visions shifted again. This time darker. Less clear. But one thing stood out. The symbol. Burning brighter. Spreading. Changing. "You will carry the mark," the figure said. "And with it, power beyond your suffering." Frank's chest rose and fell slowly. And my children? The figure did not answer immediately. They will never suffer again. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Frank looked at the visions again. Then back at the figure. His voice came out steady but cautious. And what happens if I refuse? The figure stepped closer. The air grew colder. Darker. Then it spoke. And this time, there was no softness. No one escapes the mark. It's a choice. Suddenly, Frank was back in the room. The children clung to him. The symbol glowed brighter than ever. And standing beside it was the old woman? But no. She was no longer frail. Her posture was straight. Her eyes burned brighter. Her presence undeniable. Choose wisely, Frank, she said. His heart pounded. His children held on to him tightly. The symbol pulsed. The voice echoed again. Accept or lose everything again. Frank closed his eyes. Then slowly, he opened them and spoke one word. Frank's heart pounded as he stared at the glowing symbol on the wall. The old woman's warning echoed in his mind. The choice you make now will define everything. Beware what follows the light and the shadow. The children were huddled together in the corner of the room, their eyes wide, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. Adiz clutched Chinidu's hand tightly, her small body trembling, while Obina's brows furrowed in confusion and fear. Frank forced himself to take a slow, steadying breath. Despite the lingering terror of the past few days, the void, the shadow figure, the supernatural warnings, he felt a flicker of clarity. Children, he said firmly, his voice calm yet strong, we are together and nothing can break us. His words, though simple, had a grounding effect. The room seemed to settle, as if acknowledging his resolve. The red glow of the symbol softened, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Frank stepped closer, raising his hand cautiously toward the wall. As he did, the glow responded, brightening, swirling, almost beckoning him. Suddenly, the shadow figure appeared again, but this time, it moved differently. It circled Frank slowly, no longer menacing but observant, like a guardian testing his courage. Frank's instincts screamed danger, yet he held his ground. I am not afraid, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. At that moment, the old woman spoke, her voice low and melodic. The trials you faced, the pain, the betrayal, the abandonment, they were all to test your spirit. Only one who walks with truth and love in his heart can endure the awakening. Frank's mind raced. Memories of losing his home, his wealth, and the ridicule of friends and strangers all surged back, but so did his unwavering faith. The love for his children, the hope for a better future, and the belief in God's protection had carried him through every hardship. Then it happened. The symbol leapt from the wall, spinning in the air before Frank. It transformed into a small, glowing orb hovering at eye level. Light radiated from it, warm and pure, filling the room with an energy that seemed alive. Frank extended his hand. The orb floated into his palm. A rush of visions flooded his mind, not of suffering, but of possibility. He saw himself rebuilding his life, protecting his children, and creating a home filled with love and safety. He saw his family thriving, the neighborhood changing around them, his former friends watching in astonishment. The orb pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, and he knew this was a gift, a chance to reclaim everything he had lost. The shadow figure nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and then vanished. The old woman smiled faintly, her glowing eyes softening. You have chosen wisely, she said. Walk with your heart, and the world will follow you. Then, without another word, she disappeared, leaving the room bathed only in the gentle light of the orb. Frank exhaled deeply, tears sliding down his cheeks. Children, we're going to be okay, he whispered. Adiz ran into his arms first, then Obina and Chinidu clung to him tightly. For the first time in months, the weight of despair lifted from his shoulders. The following days were transformative. Guided by the strange energy of the orb, Frank found opportunities where none existed before. Small contracts, honest clients, and unexpected allies appeared. His previous debts seemed to dissolve or restructure, and the bank returned part of his seized property after legal documents revealed the irregularities in the previous transaction that had ruined him. The neighborhood that once felt hostile and oppressive began to feel alive with possibility. Frank worked tirelessly, not just for survival, but for a vision of hope. The children's laughter returned to their home. Adiz started drawing again, her sketches full of fantastical creatures and bright colors. Chinidu's curiosity blossomed, and Obina's confidence grew with each small accomplishment. Yet, the greatest miracle was the healing of relationships. Some friends who had mocked him now approached, humbled by his perseverance and evident integrity. Others offered help without expectation, recognizing the quiet dignity with which he had endured hardship. And though his wife had left, she returned weeks later not as a judgmental figure, but as someone seeking forgiveness. Frank, having grown wiser, offered only understanding and a gentle, firm boundary, choosing instead to protect his children and their peace. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Frank stood outside his small but now fully restored home. His children ran freely in the yard, their laughter blending with the sounds of the street vendors and the distant calls of neighbors. He held the glowing orb in his hands one last time. It pulsed warmly, acknowledging his victory. Then, as silently as it had arrived, the orb vanished into the sky, leaving behind only the soft glow of sunset and the certainty that Frank's journey had transformed him forever. Frank looked at the horizon, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. He understood now that wealth and comfort were fleeting, but love, faith, and integrity were eternal. He knelt briefly, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude. The trials, the shadow figure, the mysterious symbol, all had been a crucible, shaping him into a man who could face any darkness without fear. From that day forward, Frank's life flourished. His business thrived, rooted in honesty and trust. His children excelled in school, their lives filled with opportunity and hope. The lower-class neighborhood they once called home became a place of community and support, shaped in part by Frank's efforts to uplift those around him. Though the supernatural events had passed, the lessons remained: courage in the face of fear, perseverance through betrayal, and the power of love and faith to transform even the darkest moments. Frank had been tested and had emerged victorious, not just in fortune, but in heart, spirit, and family. As night fell, Frank looked at the stars above Lagos, deep in thought. Somewhere out there, the forces that had tested him still existed, subtle and unseen, but he no longer feared them. He had faced the void, confronted shadows, and emerged stronger. His family, whole and happy, was proof that even the deepest despair could give birth to hope. And so, Frank's story came full circle not just as a tale of loss and struggle, but as one of triumph, love, and the unshakable power of the human spirit.
My dear friends, lovers of stories, if this story touched your heart, then you are already part of our storytelling family. Hit the subscribe button right now and join us here on Telltale Stories TV.